So we're going to go over HR, human resource management. It's important to understand that in terms of our learning objectives, uh, HR can be a little convoluted sometimes. We just know it's a place that is managing our human resources. The you employee, it's sort of like an employee facilitation center at a lot of companies, handling employee disputes and issues. But I think what's really important is to understand that HR is uh, it's for the benefit of the company. Okay, it's not for your benefit; it's for the company's benefit, and that's important to understand. Is designed to manage the human resources of the company, right? So it's not a fair, arbitratable place where if you have an issue or grievance, you go to HR. People do that. There's conflict resolution. They take care of things, but they're for the best interest of the company. So if you work for a firm that has a union, go to your union. All right, go to your union first. Unions, they have lawyers, union leaders, the union lawyers. Some unions are not that great. Some are much better. But contact if you're having certain grievances, you contact your union, right? Uh, Consult with them first. You go through the HR channels as need be. If you don't have a union, then HR is usually where you go through. Like for example, we'll go. This is more textbook stuff, right? This is HR from a textbook standpoint. I'm giving you guys some practical advice here in the workplace. If you're having a grievance with your manager, and the question is, are they following process? Are they following protocol, right? If your manager is not following company process, company protocol, then do you file a grievance with HR, right? Do you go to the manager above them, right? Things of that sort. So, or do you just talk to your manager directly, right? And then the other issue is the reason why you're having a grievance because someone's coming after you deliberately, or something is being done to you, or things of that sort. So generally speaking, if there's an actual company policy being broken and it's against you, then you go to HR, right? Because the company wants to enforce their policies, right? It's in their best interest to enforce company policies. So they want to enforce those policies. So if you're saying, hey, this policy that your company has is not being enforced properly, is being enforced improperly upon me, then you go to HR, right? If you feel like your company is doing something wrong and illegal, you don't go to HR. Right? That's a whistleblower issue, right? Or they're doing something illegal against you, like an employment discrimination issue. That's not an HR issue, right? So HR issues are pertaining to a breach where you would go there. Obviously, like you go to HR for payroll stuff and things of that. So that's basic stuff. But if there's an arbitration or dispute, it's disputable through HR when it's a breach of company policy and you're involved, hopefully not the one breaching the policy, right? Then they can support and help you because they want to maintain their company policies. So that's important to understand the distinction between it, because if it's a company policy dispute and you're involved and you want to arbitrate it, then you arbitrate it. If it's not a company policy issue being broken and it's a more serious issue that can make the company look bad, something inherent to a problem with the company itself. So it's not a company policy, but the company doing something fishy or strange or weird or wrong, then maybe you should seek a legal advice. Okay. Seek legal advice in the matter. Talk to your union if you're with a union. Talk to them either way. So I just want to give you guys clarification, understanding how HR works. Maybe some people might not agree with me. I'm just being real. Okay. Who pays their pay? When you go to HR component in a company, who pays their salary? The employee, the business does, the company. So everyone that's working there is paid by the company. So whose interest do they have? The company's interest. So that's, you have to remember that. Okay. They're there to provide human resource support. You are an employee, you are a human resource. They're facilitating that. Okay. So be smart about the situation, understand what you're involved with. All right. Now, this is more textbook stuff that we're going to be learning. So, what is a human resource management, right? The process of determining human resource needs and then recruiting, selecting, developing, motivating, evaluating, compensating, and scheduling employees to achieve organizational goals. The HRM role has grown because of increased recognition of employees as a resource, changes in laws that rewrote old workplace practices. Okay, that's one of the bigger measurements right there. So as the figure shows, human resource management is more than hiring and firing personnel. All activities are designed to achieve organizational goals within the laws that affect human resource management, which I kind of just mentioned, right? So human resource management, they do recruiting, so hiring, selecting, other parts and pieces of the corporation are involved in that process. It's not HR that solely determines if they hire you, if it's for a specific position in a specific segment. Managers or directors of that segment are very much involved in the recruitment process. You know, how closely involved they are could easily depend on the company. It depends on a lot of things, right? So HR might say, hey, we selected these 5 people, pick one, right? And in many cases, that might not be the case. Director may be very involved in that recruitment process. Depends on the company. Okay, so selection depends on company, recruitment depends on company. Training and development depends, right? Sometimes training and development can be done directly by direct reports. You might have a different segment that's just a training and development segment. Depends on the company, right? Motivation, I don't know about that, right? Depends. What's a motivator? So, getting paid, handling your salary, your paycheck, sure. Yeah. Evaluation. Um, they're involved in evaluation processes, obviously. Is usually your manager or your direct report that's responsible for assessing and evaluating uh, your performance, but it's very much tied to the human resource management process. Because what if they're not doing it properly? What if there's issues? Uh, and you see this chart, there's the big word, there's a word at the very top. I don't know if you guys can see. There's a circle. The top of the circle says legal environment, right? That's important because all this ties to legalities, right? Is really a lot of is managing the human resource. You are a human resource and managing the risk factors and the legal risk factors that entail managing a human resource, which is you. So all this is really saying is you are a human resource. You have liability associated with your presence and being in the company, but you're also a valued and important human resource. How do we manage the legal environment in regards to also utilizing your services as a human resource? All right. So that's what that means. Compensation and benefits, scheduling, employee union relations, career management, and human resource management. All this is a big circle of legal environment. Okay. So it's sort of like a human HR's facilitation of human resources and also making sure everything's compliant on a legal standpoint and removing any legal risk management associated with human resources. Infringing on people's rights, their employment rights, things of that sort. Their job is to make sure things are being done right, protocols being done right, management's following protocol, things of that sort. Uh, you don't want to get sued, right? So that's important. Let's see. Okay. So the human resource challenge. this is just sort of going over um, the challenges in the role, right? So global politics, technology, uncertainty in global politics, multi-generational workforce. So you got people from Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, could we all be working in the same place? Different values, different beliefs, different ages, different thought processes, everything can be challenging, right? What if you have shortage of trained workers? There's going all these different challenges that are associated on the human resource side. All right, now this is the important stuff. Stuff that you'll see in the exam, things that pertain to sort of the drive for human resource is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title 7 prohibits, or VII prohibits, discrimination in hiring, firing, compensation, apprenticeships, training, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment based on race, religion, creed, sex, national origin, age, sexual orientation, gender identity. So what if you feel like, my boss, my manager, I feel like they're discriminating against me because of my sexual orientation or gender identity, right? Yeah, I've met people, they've told me that, right? Uh, they can't prove it. They're smart, hardworking people, you know, they felt like they're being discriminated against in terms of like and I've seen it in the workplace. We've seen these things, and I thought that's not cool. It's not right. Uh, in fact, you're having conversations with people, but sometimes the work culture dictates otherwise. So that's why the Civil Rights Act of 1964 came into play, where it's like, hey, it's your company, do what you want, just don't break the law, and here's a new law, right? So one of the jobs of HR is making sure that this is not happening, right? Or these things are happening in the proper alignment. And that's why these laws come into place. And then the need for a human resource management center is important to make sure that, is that director discriminating? You know? So anyway, 1972 Equal Employment Opportunity Act, the EEOA, has strengthened the Equal Opportunity Commission, giving it broad powers. Right to issue workplace guidelines for acceptable employer conduct, can mandate specific record-keeping procedures, the power of enforcement for its mandate, and it enforces affirmative action. That's the big word, right? Affirmative action. Employment activities designed to right past wrongs by increasing opportunities for minorities and women. So there's a big law, right? Is your company enforcing that or not enforcing it? There's initiatives. So this is like, these laws are important factors as to why the legal environment is an important factor as to why human resource management is in place, right? So Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs ensures that employers doing business with the federal government comply with the non-discrimination and affirmative action laws. And the Civil Rights Act of 1991, which isn't that long ago, right? So they amended Title VII and gave victims of discrimination the right to a jury trial and possible damages. Okay. So you're hiring employees, and you can be hit with these issues and get sued. So you got to follow the law. So, HR is important. How do you follow the law? Now, I'm telling you from experience that human resource is for the protection and benefit of the employer, not the employee. okay? Because you're the liability. You're being hired, you're the liability coming in. Either you're a good employee for the company or you're not. It's for the company's benefit. Okay, so you have to remember that. So they're going to follow these rules. What if they're not following these rules? What if they're breaking these rules and they want to break these rules, but they want to do so in a way that they feel like they can get away with it, and they're using the obscurity of how they manage employees to do so? What do you do? Right? It happens all the time, right? I've seen it happen. Uh, not here at CUNY. I've seen it other places. Talking to friends and people, strangers, and their experiences, and their experiences have showed me or explained, the similar challenges. Big name companies. You do probably your parents do business with them. You may do business with them, and it's not that the company feels a certain way. Not that the company feels a certain way. The company's not that way, but it could be management in a specific environment that is choosing to not to follow these laws in their decision making, because humans are naturally biased in the decision making. And then you get this sort of begrudging feeling where you feel like you're being discriminated when in fact you may not be, but maybe you are. So then how do you deal with that situation, right? So HR also, tries to deal with that situation, but not for your benefit as the employee. It's for the employer's benefit and protection. You have to remember that. Okay. That's why lawyers exist, unfortunately, in this circumstance. Okay. So know the laws, know your laws, understand why they exist. So reading these things may seem boring, but they're not, because they're here for your protection. So if you ignore them and say, "Oh, this is BS. I don't care. I don't want to read this. This doesn't matter." It does. Because if you're in this classroom, this virtual classroom, right, and you're looking for a job or you're going to work, these things affect you. If you become a boss or a manager, these things affect you. Whatever side you're on, these things impact you. So know the laws, understand them. You don't have to memorize them word for word. For the exam, you should, right? Because that's the way exams are. But I'd be familiar with them, why they exist, what they're there for. It helps you understand your environment, the legal environment. Okay. So laws protecting employees with disabilities and older employees. I think I clicked the button wrong. There we go. So Americans with Disability Act of 1990, not that long ago, requires employees to give applicants with physical or mental disabilities the same consideration for employment as people without disabilities. Passage in 2008 of Americans with Disability Amendments Act expanded protections, so they provided more protections. 2011, which is not that long ago, saw regulations that widened the range of disabilities covered by the ADA and shift the burden of proof of disability from employers to employees. Sorry, from employees to employers. So essentially, the employer needs to prove otherwise, right? So age discrimination employment. This is super common. It still happens today. Just it is what it is, right? Protects workers 40 and over from employment and workplace discrimination, hiring, firing, promotion, layoff, compensations, benefits, job assignment, training. Guys, it still happens today. I don't care what anyone says. It's an issue, right? You're over a certain age. You're too old for the job. People don't want to hire you, right? And what if you're 90 and you have issues seeing, hearing, you've got like onset of dementia, and you want to apply for a job? What? No one's gonna hire you. But what about the ADEA? So it's important to understand a couple of things here, right? First thing to understand is, what if I have to do a job, but I can't do it, and that's part of my disability, right? I want to drive a truck, but I don't have any hands and legs. The people that drive, but they have apparatusi that they use to drive, custom things made, and it's amazing. And they say, I want to be a truck driver. What? Well, what? Right? Is that, or I want to fly an airplane. Hire me. Right? So by law, you can't discriminate. The question then is, this has come up. Is your disability, can you do the job? Right? So that's one of the first things, can you do the job? Are you qualified to do the job? That's the first thing. I may not be disabled in a specific way, but I may not necessarily be qualified to do a job because I may not have the experience to do something. I may not have the ability to do it. I just can't, like, I want to be a pro NBA player. Sorry, it's not happening, right? Don't say that. You could be anything. It's not happening, guys. I'm not going to be a pro NBA player. Okay. I've accepted that reality. Okay. I'm not like 7 foot tall and so on and so forth, right? But there's some people, they're great NBA players and they're not 7 foot tall, but whatever. Uh, you have to have, you're applying for a job. You have to meet the requirements of the job. But are the requirements discriminatory? Are they breaking any laws? That's the first question, right? So they should not. Then when you apply, are you able-bodied or able to do the job? So some companies will hire people with disabilities. This is I'm only going to give you guys the real talk, or I'm not going to give you the BS talk. Never going to give you the BS talk. I'll give you the real talk. Real talk, you hire someone with a disability. Look, we got our token guy that's disabled, right? And then you don't hire anyone else like that because you have the token disabled guy. And then you go on and you discriminate in your practices. And you can say, well, look, we meet the requirement. We have an employee that's disabled. How could we be discriminating if we have that? Right? So, companies do that. They do that, is what it is. How do you prove it? All right. So, if I went to a strip club and say, hey, I'd like to apply to be a stripper and it's all women, I'm probably not gonna get that job, guys. Just letting you know. Are you discriminating against me? So you draw a line, right? The laws are there to protect people with specific issues, is to protect against discrimination, racism, people discriminating against you for your religion, things of that sort, right? But you have to be qualified to do the job. That's first and foremost, right? And people sued each other over this, and this gone to courts, and there's judges ruled, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of legal material surrounding different cases to show evidence or causality of a circumstance. But you need to understand the laws, right? So if you have a physical or mental disability, first of all, if you are on a job recruitment, someone's recruiting you, they can't ask you, hey, do you have crushing anxiety, extreme depression, ruminating thoughts? Do you sometimes feel like the world's against you? Do you feel unmotivated, depressed, and lazy at times? Like, they don't ask you those questions, right? They can't. They can't say, do you have any mental disabilities? That they can't ask you that because it's illegal. Because why would you want to know that unless you want to discriminate against me for my disability? Okay. So some people hide their disabilities. Sometimes you can't hide it because look, you can see I'm clearly disabled. All right. So these laws are there to protect those because people with disabilities get discriminated upon. Right. And then the age discrimination too. But you do see companies like you walk into a Home Depot and they don't discriminate at age. You see a lot of elderly people working at a Home Depot. Some companies are very proud about it. Uh, we're on camera, so uh, it's important to understand that like these things happen, guys. It's this it's real. People discriminate, employees discriminate. They want a certain someone. It's just what it is, right? It's like you go to the bar. I don't drink alcohol, by the way. Okay. I'm using as an example. You go to the bar and you're like, wow, how come the waitresses are so cute and attractive? That's not random, right? They went through a hiring process. There's a reason why they chose those people, right? So they're discriminating. It is what it is, right? It's like you go to, go to Hooters. I don't go there. It's not a place I want to go to. But I'm just saying, right? It's called Hooters for a reason. So, if I wanted to get hired there, they don't hire me. You think people haven't tried to do that, haven't sued or whatever? You know, there's a lot. You got to draw a line, and the line has nothing to do with what you want. It's the law. It's the fact that a job still has requirements. You can get lost in legal cases with this. I'm sure if there's a law class at CUNY, they go over this stuff. There's a lot to learn about it. But you should know your laws, though. Okay, so understand these laws. Understand they're important. Uh, Remember them. Okay. So the effects of legislation. Employers must know the law and act accordingly. Legislation affects all areas of human resource management. Changes in law and legislation occur regularly. Okay. What's a job analysis? Job analysis is a study of what is done by employees who hold various job titles. So what does that mean exactly? Right? Like what are they saying in that capacity? So a job description is a summary of the objectives of a job, the type of work, the responsibilities and duties. Job specifications is a written summary of the minimum qualifications of the worker to do that job. And you'll always see that. You'll always see a job application, it'll have the description and the specifications, right? So job analysis is a study of what is done by employees who hold those job titles. So it's they need to determine, HR needs to determine the description of the job specifications, right? So if you can say, well, how come they didn't hire me? Do you check all the boxes, right? Now they've got AI and software combing through resumes. It's crazy. Someone did a little research somewhere on Reddit where they used AI to comb through resumes, and then they submitted to see what AI chose. Then they had the same AI create a resume for someone, and the AI was more likely to accept the resume that was written by AI than resumes that were not, which was interesting, right? So if you're using autonomy, so automated processes for your HR processes to sort through resumes and job hires, that automation process is something. If you don't understand the process of the automation, it limits your opportunity. So if you're using AI to sort through resumes, and then you have your resume made through AI, the AI is like, oh, I like this resume because the same program wrote it, right? So anyway, some companies they get tens of thousands of resumes, so it can be difficult. So job analysis, you have the job description, which is, what is the job? So these are examples, right? Store manager of the area, helping the store manager estimate the volume of the order. This is what you do, right? So job description is what you do. Job specification is what you need, right? You need 2 years sales experience. You need good communication skills. You need at least a high school diploma and 2 years of college credit, right? So what you do, what you need. And that's how you usually see job resumes, right? So your resume should be curtailed around hitting those job specifications, right? And then your experiences should be applicable to the job description in terms of skill sets and abilities and accomplishments, right? So that's how you kind of think of how your resume should line up. And sure, you could take you could literally take a company's job description, their job specification, feed it to an AI, put your resume and say, clean it up. Do that, right? That's what people are doing now. They're doing that. So how's that going to impact it? Who knows? Uh, but as things get more automated, it doesn't necessarily get better. Sometimes you need a pair of eyes looking at something. Okay, so recruitment, the set of activities used to obtain a sufficient number of the right people at the right time. Human resource managers use both internal and external sources to recruit. Small businesses often make use of web sources like Glassdoor, Indeed, and LinkedIn to recruit employees. Okay, so here we have sort of source, like where do you hire, how do you get employees? So these are external sources. So these are outside ways to get employees. There's headhunters as well. Headhunters are people that are professionals whom you hire who go try to find a person to fit your job requirement. Okay. Then you see all these external resources and internal resources, transfers, promotions, and it's hub to employee resource department. And you see the selection, the hiring, and the orientation and training. Okay. So the selection process, hiring contingent workers, workers who do not have the exception of regular full-time employment, the gig economy, right? This includes part-time workers, temporary workers, seasonal workers, independent contractors, interns, and co-op students, contingent workers. So companies hire contingent workers when full-time workers are on leave. They have different reasons, right? But it's important to understand that some people uh, hire them because it's more cost effective, right? It's why colleges hire adjuncts versus hiring full-time professors because it's more cost effective for them to do that. So contingent workers are also, seasonal as well. And there's laws about, being a contingent worker versus not, and what constitutes certain things. And it's important to understand that as well. Okay, so training development, the 3 steps: assessing organizational needs, designing training activities to meet those identified needs, and evaluating the training's effectiveness. So all it's saying is that when you're developing a training program, you're developing a way to train your employees, right? So let's say you start a restaurant, and it's you and a friend or by yourself, and you're doing all the cooking, the cleaning, the selling, you're doing everything. And you're like, damn, I'm working 16 hours a day every day, 18 hours a day every day. I had to sleep in the kitchen a couple of times because I was so tired. I got to hire people, right? So now you're hiring people. You got to train them, right? To do your task. So if you're cooking or prepping, you got to train them. So you just say, hey, come in the back, look what I do. Watch me do this, right? Now copy it. Is that the best method? And it's important to understand that you could think of it as a process, right? So the 3 steps is, what do we need? What does the organization need? What does my kitchen need? What type of staff do I need? What type of skills do they need to have? Right? Are they low skills, no skills? Have you worked in a kitchen before? Have you worked in a restaurant before? Right? Have you worked busing before? If not, can I train them? Right? So you design the training activities to meet the identified needs. So what do I need to teach and show them to do that? And then are they doing it? Hey, I showed you what to do. I identified if you could do it. All right, go do it. Well, what if they're not doing it? What if they're cooking something in the back and they're destroying it? How do you evaluate the effectiveness of your training? Right? You have to watch them. show them it takes time. So those are things to take into consideration in the training and development. I would say evaluating the training's effectiveness. You have to have evaluation methods. A lot of times it's just kind of oversight, seeing how a person is doing, looking at the quality of work, observing the quality of work, giving them guidance, giving them training, having them work with a more seasoned person, an expert in the kitchen, or yourself, or someone whose job is to train people. And then they got to just make sure they're doing their job, they're learning, all right? Right. So most common training development activities, orientation, because you guys, you're here in class, you had to have an orientation to understand about the school. You get on the job training. There's apprenticeships where you're learning underneath someone. Off the job training, so it's learning when you're not working officially. There's online training, vestibule training, and job simulation. So job simulation is where you're pretending to do the job. Maybe you're learning to be a pilot and you're flying a airplane simulator, right? Just simulating the job. You're a surgeon and you're learning how to become a surgeon. So you have a little test dummy thing and you're learning how to suture an open wound. Job simulation, right? Versus going into a real place and sewing someone up, not quite the same. Okay, so management development is the process of training and educating employees to become good managers, and then monitoring the progress of their managerial skills over time. So management training is a little different. It's sort of like I'm teaching you to manage and train others. How do you do that? Right? So the process for that, the management training includes on-the-job coaching, right? So maybe you're shadowing an actual, and that's what I've seen personally, is you're going through a management training process, you go through orientation, you have to already know the job functions of what you're doing, right? So you're managing 10 employees at a location, you should know the job role of all 10 employees, how they work, what they need to do, and then you're usually shadowing an actual manager who's doing the job, and you might spend a certain amount of time just following them, watching them, seeing what they do, ask questions. You're given some tasks to do, and then over time you eventually learn to understand what you need to do, and you start doing the job, and you usually have a manager who's above you who you can go to for questions and help and assistance, a higher level manager, or maybe someone else that provides support, and you learn, right? So that's on the job coaching. That's an understudy position. Job rotation, where you may be shadowing different managers at different locations to understand how that does the full breadth of management. And then, doing other courses and things of that sort, right? So management is really very hands-on, is how it is. And it's based upon the role you're doing. And there's so much more. It's complicated. The refinement of it, the employees, is difficult. But many times it's also meeting the company's objectives and making sure that your employees follow those checklists. They do what they're supposed to do. Okay. So networking, the process of establishing and maintaining contacts with key managers in one's own organization and other organizations that use those contacts to weave strong relationships that serve as informal development systems, right? And then mentors and experienced employees who supervises, coaches, and guides lower level employees. So, all that's part of the training and development process. Okay. So at the end of the day, you're trying to sort of appraise performance to get the best results. So here's the 6 steps of performance appraisal. Establishing performance standards that are understandable, measurable, and reasonable. And this is not so far from some of the other stuff we learned, where you're looking at performance standards, right? You're looking at, is it measurable? Is it make sense? Is it something that's repeatable? Is it something that's trackable? Is it something that's doable? Is it realistic? Right? So you have to set performance that the person that's performing the task can understand. You can measure it. And, it makes sense. So measuring is being able to really good, bad, scale of 1 to 10, what tasks are required, what is the result of the task, how should it be completed? Can you measure the process of their performance? right? Is it measurable? Are they able to understand what they're supposed to do? Are they able to understand the measurement process? So sometimes companies want to make it simple, right? You work at McDonald's, they have all these machines, they kind of automate a lot of this stuff, right? So your goal is more basic. Uh, if I'm cooking burgers and I'm the one shaping the patty, and I'm not using a device to figure out the actual size and shape and weight, you're gonna get a very imperfect product multiple times, right? But if I'm putting it into a mold or I'm weighing the meat, then you're gonna have there's some level of measurement, right? There's some level of predictability, and then based upon your performance, if your performance is to create those patties, I can measure the performance. I can take your burgers and I can just weigh them, right? I can look at them. You got 100 burgers, 100 burgers. I could put them all on a scale and they should all weigh 100 times a quarter pound. Boom, right? There you go. This is off or it's on point, right? So if you're not doing your job, I can measure it. So that's sort of, number one is the performance standards, and then being able to understand and make sure that they're trackable, measurable, right? And then clearly communicating those standards, which is number two, is you understand what needs to be done because sometimes things aren't clearly communicated. You think it is, but it's not. There's little details sometimes that don't get communicated and your employee doesn't quite get it, right? Or mistakes are made. So that's important. And you can understand clear communication by breaking down the process, the nuts to bolts process of what's being done from A to Z, and make sure whatever that. And if you just think about visualize the entire process of what needs to be done, the entire process, literally, open fridge, shelf two, like pull thing out, put here, like the entire nuts to bolts process. You can understand how to clearly communicate because you could say, well, am I communicating the entire process? Because I could argue, say, you're not communicating the process to me, the standards. That's why I couldn't do it. I couldn't measure up because the standards aren't clear. So clear communication is a big deal. It's a huge problem many times too, right? Uh, Evaluating performance against the standards, number three. All right. So, how did you do compared to what's required of you? Are all those burgers perfectly formed quarter pound patties? Right? Did you produce enough patties in a time frame? Evaluate performance. A lot of times, it comes pre-frozen, right? So, not your problem. The machine's problem. Discussing the results with the employees. As the manager, this is the results. Taking corrective action. How do we fix the issue? So, between 4 and 5, and even between 5 and 6, there could be sort of like a problem analysis, which is a separate issue, where you're sort of analyzing, assessing the where the performance and the standards don't meet, where they do meet, and where the issue could arise, because the issue could be a external issue that you weren't aware of. So that all falls under taking corrective action, but there's a process to doing that properly, right? Taking corrective action isn't you're fired. Do it better. What's wrong with you? You got to really think about it. So it's really taking corrective action is a problem solving methodology, understanding where the problem is, discovering the problem, assessing and analyzing the problem. Okay. Then 6 is using the results to make decisions. So now we got these results. Here's what you need to do. Here's a decision now. All right. So let's go to pay systems. So when you're getting compensated, because HR handles compensation, right? It's important to understand pay systems. So I will go over the pay systems and then we'll end the lecture. But salary is a fixed compensation, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. See, salaried employees do not receive additional pay for extra hours. So if you're a manager, you're probably on a salary. Okay. So if you work 40 hours, you get paid X amount of dollars. If you work 50 hours, you get paid the same. If you work 60 hours, you get paid the same. So salary is paying you a fixed compensation. It doesn't matter how many hours you work, that's what you get paid. Usually you see that with management jobs. You see that with jobs that require employees to put in more labor. All right, so hourly wage or day work. This is wages based on the number of hours or days worked, used for most blue collar and clerical workers. Often employees must punch a time clock when they come in, when they leave. Hourly wages vary greatly. The federal minimum wage is $7.25, and wages go as high as 40 per hour for more skilled craftspeople. This does not include benefits such as retirement systems, which add 30% or more to the total package. It's important to understand, guys, that salary and hourly wage, you might say, oh, I'll just hire everyone as a salaried employee and have them work long hours and I'll pay them less, right? Which is illegal. You can't do that. So what this document doesn't explain is sort of like who's eligible to be a salaried employee, who's eligible to be an hourly wage employee. You just can't do that. A lot of companies, and it happens more than you think, and it's not an old problem. It's oh, they don't they do it still. In fact, a lot of companies had to have made changes because they got sued and they lost. Employees who are salaried have to fit certain requirements to be salaried because they can work extra hours. So usually a manager. You can't take someone who's in an hourly wage job and say, oh, I'm going to make you a manager, right? You give them more responsibilities, but their primary job is to do something that's an hourly wage job. And you say they're a manager and you give them a salaried job and they're working more hours and making less. And that's disputable, right? You don't go to your HR, you go to a lawyer because they could be trying to game the pay system, saying you're a manager, but you're not really. Who are you managing? Who's your employees? Who's reporting to you? Are you doing all the things we just mentioned? Are you monitoring, training? Are you responsible for hiring and firing? Are you responsible for assessing and evaluating other people? Because the answer is no, then you're probably not a manager. Okay. And there's been a lot of law cases, and the companies lose the case and they get sued. So understand your rights too. Understand the situation. Don't put yourself in into that problem. Okay. So commissions, plans. So commissions where you can get an extra percentage of the sale. I sell a certain amount of product, I get a commission, right? So let's say I sell you a book, and every book I sell, I get $1. Right? Or I sell you a car, and every car I sell, I get $1,000 added to my pay, a commission, right? And then a bonus is an extra pay for accomplishing or surpassing certain objectives. So if I'm getting $1,000 for every car I sell, I might have a bonus plan that says when I sell 10 cars, I get a $10,000 bonus. All right. So there's the commission, getting a piece of the action. There's a bonus. All right. And profit sharing is annual bonuses paid to employees based upon the company's profits. The amounts paid to each employee is based on a predetermined percentage. Profit sharing is one of the most common forms of performance-based pay. All right. You might see that at a law firm. Uh, you know, maybe you're self-employed and you have employees working under you, and your pay is loosely determined by how profitable your company is, and you have a profit sharing plan. All right. So then the gain sharing plan, which is annual bonuses paid to employees based upon achieving specific goals, such as quality measures, customer satisfaction measures, and production targets. And then stock options, if you have the right to buy company stock, okay, they give you stock options. So anyway, I'm going to end our lecture. Do you guys have any questions? Let me just end recording.